One of the most popular sites in Twickenham, southwest London, is a group of spectacular marble statues that are located in York House Gardens, beside the River Thames. They have become known, rather literally, as the Naked Ladies. The house and gardens predominantly date back to the 1630s, built for Andrew Pitcairn, a courtier of the Earl of Manchester and a friend of King Charles I. It takes its name from the York family who leased the land where it was built. Over the next 2 centuries, it was the home of a series of wealthy figures, including the French royal family, and in 1906, it was bought by its final private owner, the Indian philanthropist Sir Ratan Tata. Tata had the gardens of York House laid out in the style of an Italian garden to entertain his guests and show off the new group of statues he had recently acquired, comprising 8 women and 2 horses. They were likely commissioned from the Roman studio of Orazio Andreoni at the end of the 19th century and were carved from white Carrara marble from the northernmost tip of modern-day Tuscany. The statues were commissioned and brought to Britain in the late 1800s by financier and swindler Whittaker Wright. Wright had made huge fortunes from the mining industry. At one time, he was known as the richest man in the world, and he had purchased the Lee Park estate in Surrey, renaming it Whitley Park. He had intended for the Italian statues to adorn his estate. However, whilst involved in major railway construction projects, his business empire collapsed, and he tried to cover this up by moving money between companies. When the truth emerged, it led to panic, and stockholders brought him to trial in 1904. After being found guilty, he took a cyanide pill in the courthouse. His estate was sold, and his beloved statues were purchased by Ratan Tata for £600 and brought to Twickenham in 1909. Even getting the statues to their final destination was not without drama. They are of a monumental scale, with several of the individual blocks weighing over 5 tons. A newspaper at the time reported how a horse and cart carrying a piece of statue overturned at the corner of Oak Lane, smashing the case and throwing the horse to the ground. Although they were able to incorporate all the statues into one tableau, there were no instructions to guide their placement. The interpretation of the sculptor's intended design has led to debate about the unusual poses of some of the statues. There is a standing nude female figure flanked by 2 winged steeds, which appear to be being offered gifts by nymphs rising from shells, with figures in various attitudes of play at the lower level. One lady helps another out of the water, another lady reaches out for something we can only guess. Originally, some of the ladies were holding pearls, but much of this detail has now been lost. There have been various theories as to the intended subject matter, with pearl fishers, Pegasus, naiads, and the birth of Venus all having been suggested in addition to the usual attribution as Oceanids. The statues came into the de facto possession of Twickenham Council in 1924, when they purchased York House for their new town hall. The Tatas had been unable to find a buyer despite having put them up for auction, and so they came as part of the sale of the house to the council. During the Blitz, the authorities were concerned that the bright white marble would reflect the moonlight and make for an identifiable landmark for the Luftwaffe coming up the Thames. They therefore had them covered in a grey sludge like paint. Years of severe neglect of the statues followed, and by the 1980s they were in an awful state of disrepair. Defaced by graffiti, discoloured by wartime paint, and missing parts. After being almost destroyed by a complete lack of upkeep, the York House Statues Restoration Fund charity was set up in the 1980s, and the Naked Ladies went through a major restoration project. The project removed graffiti, leftover grey paint from the war, and replaced lost parts, including fingers and a pearl. New water pumps were added and fencing put in place to protect the site from vandals. It was a massive and costly project and was led by a brilliant collaboration of efforts, including the York House Society and the Twickenham Society, with donations coming from the Thames Trust, the Goddington Trust, the RIBA, Sir Richard Attenborough and the Tata Foundation. Many local residents helped with fundraising efforts. It officially reopened to a large crowd on the 30th of April 1989, and further restoration and maintenance projects continue to this day. Although hundreds of thousands pass by the statues each year, not many know the unusual story behind them. Even experts debate their true meaning, but this lends a certain mystery that continues to inspire and captivate its visitors.